Pull up a seat, everybody, because the whole traveling roadshow just kicked the tent pole out from under itself and the sheriff's department caught it on camera. I'm about to walk you through the wildest 20 minutes Blueface has ever put on a live stream. And if the thumbnail already made you flinch, brace up, because the raw footage is worse than the thumbnail promised. Somebody, somewhere, sitting behind a burner phone, decided to weaponize the 911 line against Blueface, against Nevaeh, against a 4-year-old baby who did nothing to nobody, and the whole thing detonated inside Blueface restaurant while the camera was still rolling and the fryer was still hot. 20 deputies, badges out, weapons drawn, marching customers out one by one. And Blueface's first move, before he grabbed his kid, before he shielded his fiancée, was to angle the tripod. Baby, listen, the receipts on this one are so heavy the whole internet is squatting under the weight. And by the time I finish walking you through the timeline, you're going to understand why this is not just another Blueface stunt. This might be the moment the algorithm finally rips the mask off the entire operation. Here's the thing. If you've been anywhere near this channel this year, you already know that Blueface has been living on the edge of a SWAT call the way most people live on the edge of a paycheck. Every other week there's a new video, a new siren, a new burner phone dialing dispatch with a fresh script. Blueface hit his fiancée, Blueface pulled a weapon, Blueface bleeding out in the parking lot. And every time the deputies show up, the story falls apart on camera. But this one hit different. This one hit at his restaurant, King of Crabs, in the middle of dinner service, with paying customers at their tables, with Baldwin behind the counter, with the baby somewhere in the back, and with Nevaeh reacting in real time like a woman who has finally figured out that the internet is not her friend, the police are not her friend, and the man live streaming her breakdown is not her friend either. See, the deputies rolled up hard. They set the perimeter, they cleared the parking lot, they pulled every human being out of that restaurant one by one with hands above their heads, and they told everybody that the call had come in claiming Blueface had put his hands on Nevaeh, that shots had been fired, 5 rounds, and that somebody was bleeding out inside. That's a full active shooter response. That's the kind of response where a deputy with a rookie trigger finger can turn a hoax into a funeral in half a second. And while all of that was unfolding, Blueface, the man whose fiancée and child were allegedly inside, pointed his camera at the ceiling, said the words, "This is great for content," and thanked a viewer named Lasha for gifting 5 subscriptions. Bottom line, the man was farming the trauma before the trauma finished landing. Watch this, because the audio of that stream is going to be studied for years. You had Blueface laughing on mic. You had Nevaeh screaming for her baby. You had Baldwin cursing out the deputies for the 4th SWAT call in as many months. And you had one lonely voice in the chat, a viewer with more conscience than the man broadcasting, writing that this whole thing is traumatizing for the kids. That comment scrolled past Blueface's face, and he didn't blink. He kept counting subscribers. He kept angling the shot. And when a deputy told him to hand up his ID, he said, quote, "We could do this every day, chat." That single sentence is the thesis statement of the whole Blueface economy in 2026. Every day, every dispatch, every content cycle, every check. Real simple, a SWAT call is not a prank. A SWAT call is a felony in most jurisdictions and a body count risk in all of them. The last 2 years alone have delivered documented deaths tied to false SWAT reports, from Kansas to Tennessee to a suburb outside of Chicago. And the FBI has been begging local departments to build burner phone tracing pipelines for exactly this reason. So when the deputy on scene told Blueface, on camera, that the caller had used a burner and could not be traced yet, he was not describing a technical problem. He was describing a business model. Somebody has figured out that Blueface restaurant is a soft target, that the sheriff's department will respond every single time, and that every response generates footage that Blueface himself will monetize. That is a closed-loop grift, and it is running on public money. Cut the sugar out of it. The taxpayers of Los Angeles County are subsidizing Blueface livestream. Every deputy hour, every gas tank, every dispatcher shift, every rifle drawn on a dinner customer. That's your paycheck, my paycheck, and the paycheck of the grandmother down the block who has never heard the name Blueface in her life. The sheriff's department has now confirmed, on the record, that this is the 4th SWAT response to a Blueface-linked address in 6 months. 4. Not 1. Not 2. 4. And nobody in a position of power has moved to file charges against the caller because they still cannot trace the burner. That silence from the DA's office is starting to sound like consent. Peep this. When the deputies finally got Nevaeh out of the restaurant, she was hysterical. She wanted her baby. She was asking, over and over, where her 4-year-old was, whether he was hurt, whether the deputies had him in the back of a cruiser, whether anybody had put eyes on him. And this is the part that made the chat go quiet, because just hours earlier, on the same live stream, Blueface had been mocking that same child, calling him names, telling the chat that the boy was dumb, roasting his own son for laughs and a drop of engagement. So when Nevaeh flipped into full panicked mother mode the second the deputies pulled up, half the internet clocked it as performance. Baby, listen, the audience is not stupid. The audience has watched Nevaeh be mean to that boy on stream for 2 hours, and then watched her cry about him for 2 minutes. And the audience is doing the math in public. Here's the thing about Nevaeh. She is not the villain of this story, but she is not the hero either. She is the woman who chose Blueface knowing exactly who Blueface is. She sat through the Chrisean chapter. She sat through the Jaidyn Alexis chapter. She sat through the prison chapter. She sat through the baby shower where somebody shot rounds into the ceiling and Chrisean allegedly pulled up looking for a fight. Nevaeh watched every single frame of that history unfold on her own timeline, and she still walked toward Blueface. That is not a woman who was tricked. That is a woman who bet the house on being different. And when the deputies were marching her out with her hands over her head, in a parking lot full of cell phone cameras, the bet was collecting. Which means we need to talk about the caller. Because that's the whole game now, the identity of the caller. Blueface himself, in the middle of getting patted down, offered the deputy 3 names. He said it might be Chrisean. He said it might be Chrisean, the trainer. He said it might be Jaidyn Alexis. 3 suspects with 3 separate motives. 3 suspects who Blueface has publicly beefed with in the last 30 days. The deputy nodded. The deputy wrote it down. And the deputy said, plainly, on camera, that the burner phone had made a tracing impossible so far. So now the streets are running their own investigation, and the streets have a short list. Break it down like this. Chrisean Rock has motive. Blueface humiliated her on the podcast circuit, called her names on his own stream, put his baby with somebody else on national television, and moved Nevaeh into the house Chrisean once slept in. Chrisean's fingerprints on this would surprise nobody in the barbershop. But Chrisean also has children. Chrisean also has cameras on her every day. Chrisean also knows what a felony charge does to a custody agreement. And Chrisean's team has been telegraphing legal caution for 6 months straight. If Chrisean did this, Chrisean did it stupid. And Chrisean is not stupid anymore. Jaidyn Alexis has motive too. Jaidyn is the mother of Blueface's oldest child. Jaidyn watched Blueface parade Nevaeh through the industry as the new face of the family, while Jaidyn's own baby was being erased from the narrative. Jaidyn also has receipts. Jaidyn also has a management team. Jaidyn just dropped a public warning to Blueface, Chrisean, and Nevaeh in the last 72 hours, and Jaidyn's warnings usually land 2 weeks before whatever she warned about actually happens. Coincidence is a word people use when they haven't looked at the timeline yet. And then there's Chrisean. Chrisean is the wild card. Chrisean is the trainer, the associate, the friend who used to be in every frame of the Blueface content mill and has slowly been edited out. Chrisean has grievances Blueface has never explained on camera, financial grievances if the streets are to be believed, and Chrisean has the technical know-how to burn a phone properly. Cut the sugar out of it. Of the 3 names Blueface offered, Chrisean is the only one the deputies didn't immediately flinch at. That reaction alone is a data point. But here's the thing the entire commentary corner is missing. The identity of the caller is a distraction. The identity of the caller is what Blueface wants you arguing about. Because as long as you're arguing about who dialed 911, you're not arguing about why 911 keeps getting weaponized against a household that includes a 4-year-old baby. That baby is the story. That baby is the receipt. That baby was inside a restaurant while a full tactical response marched through the door with rifles up, and that baby's father was more concerned about the camera angle than the exit strategy. That is the sentence that should be in every headline. That is the sentence the sheriff's report should have opened with. Keep it 100 with me. Blueface has turned his own family into an intellectual property. Every crisis is a stream. Every stream is a check. Every check is a reason to court the next crisis. The economic model has calcified. The economic model has moved past shame. Blueface said the quiet part loud on his own stream. This is great for content. And the algorithm heard him. And the algorithm rewarded him. And the algorithm is going to keep rewarding him until either a deputy pulls a trigger by accident or the platform pulls the plug on purpose. Neither of those outcomes is close, which means the pattern is going to keep repeating until the pattern kills somebody. Let me slide the needle over to the sheriff's response for a second, because there's a paragraph in the report that nobody is reading. The deputies on scene documented that Blueface stream was live throughout the response. They documented that Blueface acknowledged, on stream, that he understood the response was a SWAT. They documented that Blueface made no move to end the broadcast. They documented that Blueface did not attempt to secure his 4-year-old before he angled the camera. And they documented that Blueface, when informed that a rookie deputy was still processing the perimeter, responded with sarcasm. Every one of those sentences is going to end up in a civil filing eventually. Every one of those sentences is a paper trail. Every one of those sentences is a lawyer's Christmas morning. Watch this. The moment Blueface handed over his new phone number, the deputy, the same deputy who had a rifle across his chest 90 seconds earlier, asked him if he had anything else to disclose. Blueface laughed. He said the deputies were wasting their own time. He said the deputies should already know his number from the last 3 visits. And that exchange, that laugh, that dismissal, is the exact moment the deputies stopped seeing Blueface as a possible victim and started seeing him as a possible suspect. Because the pattern of behavior a person exhibits during a SWAT response is admissible, and Blueface's pattern of behavior is a live streamer, not a victim. Here's the thing about Baldwin. Baldwin was the first employee out the door, and Baldwin came out cursing. Baldwin has watched this movie 4 times. Baldwin has been swept out of King of Crabs at gunpoint on a Tuesday and been asked to come back to work on a Wednesday like nothing happened. Baldwin is not paid enough to be somebody's B-roll. And Baldwin's reaction is important because Baldwin is the one person on the property whose economic incentive is not aligned with Blueface grift. Baldwin is the canary. Baldwin has been coughing for months. And Baldwin's next move, quitting, filing, suing, is going to tell us whether this ends with a paycheck or a lawsuit. Peep this, because the customers matter too. King of Crabs was open for dinner. There were people at those tables. There was a woman with a to-go bag. There was a family who had driven in from Compton for a novelty meal. Every single one of those people had a rifle pointed at them tonight because Blueface business model attracts SWAT calls the way honey attracts flies. Every single one of those people is now a potential plaintiff. Every single one of those people is now a witness in whatever civil case eventually lands on the docket. And every single one of those people is going to think twice before they book a table at a Blueface-owned restaurant ever again. The brand damage is not hypothetical. The brand damage is measured in receipts printed and thrown out and never printed again. Cut the sugar out of it. The entire restaurant is on borrowed time. King of Crabs was already struggling before this. Viewership on the food content side had been sliding for months. The dinner traffic had been dropping. The reviews had been trending south. And now, on top of all of that, the restaurant has become synonymous with a police perimeter. There is a version of this story where the health department shows up next week and finds 3 violations that nobody cared about 6 months ago. There is a version of this story where the landlord decides the liability premium just tripled. There is a version of this story where a competitor across the street opens a copycat menu and takes half the traffic in a weekend. The restaurant is not a restaurant anymore. The restaurant is a soundstage. And soundstages get canceled. Now let me talk about the baby. Because if I don't talk about the baby, I'm not doing this story right. The baby is 4 years old. The baby has been on stream since before he could walk. The baby has been photographed in cages, in leashes, in oversized chains, in situations no 4-year-old on planet Earth should be photographed in. The baby cannot consent. The baby cannot opt out. The baby cannot testify. The baby is a prop in a business he did not choose to be born into. And every SWAT call that lands on Blueface's front door lands on his son's front door too. If a rifle discharges by accident during one of these responses, the headline is not going to be about Blueface. The headline is going to be about the baby. And the internet is going to spend the next 20 years pretending it didn't see this coming, even though everybody with a keyboard has been screaming about it for 2 years straight. Bottom line, the child protective conversation is overdue. The county has a mandatory reporter framework. The county has a hotline. The county has case workers whose entire job is to look at situations exactly like this one and decide whether an emergency intervention is warranted. That framework has not activated for Blueface household, and there are only two possible explanations. Either the case workers don't know, which is impossible given that half of California has posted about it, or the case workers know and have decided the case is politically radioactive. Neither answer is a good answer. Neither answer protects the child. And neither answer is going to age well when the paperwork gets discovered on a Freedom of Information request 3 years from now. Here's the receipt from the sheriff's incident log. Response initiated at 7:14 p.m. Perimeter established at 7:19. First customer extracted at 7:22. Baldwin extracted at 7:26. Nevaeh extracted at 7:31. Blueface extracted at 7:34. Child recovered from a deputy's cruiser at 7:41. Scene cleared at 7:52. Total taxpayer footprint on a Tuesday evening dinner shift, 38 minutes, 11 deputies, 2 supervisors, 1K, 9, 1 drone overhead. That is the cost of 1 prank call. Now multiply that by 4 responses in 6 months. Now multiply that by the fact that dispatch has to prioritize this response over every other 911 call in the county for the duration of the perimeter. Now imagine you're the person in the next zip code having the heart attack that couldn't get an ambulance because dispatch was tied up at King of Crabs. That is not hypothetical. That is the math of resource allocation. And that math has consequences. Watch this. The most dangerous sentence Blueface uttered on that stream tonight wasn't "this is great for content." The most dangerous sentence was the one he whispered to Nevaeh right after the deputies started clearing them out. He told her, on mic, that he was pressing charges on whoever called, and that whoever called had better be ready. That sentence is going to be replayed in a courtroom eventually. That sentence is going to be replayed in a defamation filing. That sentence is going to be replayed in a countersuit. Because the moment Blueface publicly promised legal action against a specific list of named suspects, Blueface handed every one of those suspects a defamation card. Chrisean's lawyer is already saving the clip. Jaidyn's lawyer is already saving the clip. Chrisean's lawyer, if Chrisean has one, is already saving the clip. Blueface just opened 3 legal fronts at once, on camera, in front of a live audience of 40,000. Real simple. A public accusation without a police charge is a defamation. A public accusation with a police charge is either defamation or vindication depending on the verdict. And Blueface has now made himself dependent on a burner phone trace that the sheriff's department has already admitted, on camera, they cannot execute. That is a losing position. That is a chessboard with no queen. That is a man who has publicly boxed himself into needing an outcome that the state has publicly told him is unavailable. And when that outcome fails to materialize, the same audience that clapped for the accusation is going to sit back and watch 3 separate suspects lawyer up and come collect. Peep this. Nevaeh's face during the extraction. That's the tell. That's the moment. Nevaeh, in the parking lot, hands up, deputies on either side, tears cutting through the makeup, was not looking at the deputies. She was looking at Blueface. And the expression on her face was not fear of the police. It was fear of the man she chose. She looked at him the way you look at a person you just realized is not going to protect you. That expression is going to travel. That expression is going to become a screenshot. That expression is going to become a meme within 24 hours. And once that expression becomes a meme, the marriage, or whatever this arrangement is on a countdown clock. Because there is no coming back from being publicly seen as somebody's collateral damage. There is only leaving. Here's the thing about Blueface's mother. Carlisa has been silent tonight, and Carlisa's silence is its own headline. Carlisa is a woman who does not sit on a story. Carlisa has a comment for every controversy her son has ever generated. Carlisa runs her own platform, her own commentary, her own broadcast. And Carlisa has said nothing since the sheriff's report dropped. Which means one of 2 things. Either Carlisa is on her way, and the internet is about to get a monologue that ends careers, or Carlisa has finally decided her son is a liability she cannot rehabilitate. Either version of that story is a headline. Either version of that story is a chapter. And I promise you the next 48 hours are going to answer that question for us in public. Baby, listen. The Blueface economy has 3 legs. Leg 1 is Blueface himself, the rapper, the personality, the live streamer. Leg 2 is the household, Nevaeh, the baby, the restaurant, the content pipeline. Leg 3 is the villain rotation, Chrisean, Jaidyn, Chrisean, whoever the internet decides to hate this week. Tonight's SWAT call put pressure on all 3 legs at the same time. Blueface looked disposable on stream. Nevaeh looked terrified in the parking lot. And the villain rotation just gained 3 new candidates who now have documented public grievance. A 3-legged stool with pressure on all 3 legs at once is not a stool anymore. That's a pile of firewood. And somebody in that household is about to strike a match. Let me slide the needle back over to the receipts, because I want you to see the whole board. Fact 1. Blueface has been swatted 4 times in 6 months. Fact 2. The sheriff's department has confirmed on the record that they cannot trace the burner. Fact 3. Blueface publicly named 3 suspects during a live police response, on camera, with the audio archived on his own channel. Fact 4. Blueface 4-year-old was inside the perimeter during the response. Fact 5. Blueface prioritized the camera angle over the child's location. Fact 6. Nevaeh's on-camera reaction has already been clipped, memed, and reposted to every gossip account in the ecosystem within an hour. Fact 7. King of Crabs, as a business, is now indistinguishable from a crime scene in the public imagination. That's the whole receipt. End of page. Cut the sugar out of it. This is the story that ends a career. Not tomorrow. Not next week. But this is the moment that historians of the internet are going to point to when they explain how the Blueface era ended. Every celebrity has a SWAT call moment that reveals who they actually are, and Blueface's SWAT call moment revealed a man who counted subscribers while a rifle was pointed at his fiancée. That is not a moment a personality survives. That is a moment a personality gets defined by. And once a personality gets defined by a moment like that, the personality does not come back. The personality gets replaced. The audience moves on. The algorithm finds a new content mill. And Blueface becomes a footnote in the next content cycle's compilation video. Here's the thing about the platform. YouTube, Twitch, Kick, whichever one Blueface was streaming on tonight, they all have terms of service. Terms of service that specifically prohibit the broadcasting of active police responses in situations involving minors. Terms of service that specifically prohibit the monetization of dangerous events. Terms of service that specifically prohibit exactly what Blueface did on stream tonight. Every one of those platforms has a compliance team. Every one of those compliance teams is going to receive a spreadsheet of clips before noon tomorrow. And every one of those compliance teams is going to have a meeting about whether Blueface is worth the liability of keeping. Bottom line, the platform arithmetic is not on his side anymore. The platform arithmetic has flipped. The platform arithmetic is now a countdown. Watch this. The most valuable thing Blueface owns is his channel. Not the restaurant. Not the merch. Not the music catalog. The channel. Because the channel is where every other revenue stream connects. The channel is where the podcast lives. The channel is where the music promotes. The channel is where the restaurant markets. The channel is where the merch sells. If a platform pulls the channel, Blueface loses the promotional engine for every other business he owns in one afternoon, without warning, without appeal. That is the sword hanging over his head, and the SWAT livestream just handed the platform a legal reason to sharpen it. Peep this. Chrisean is watching. Chrisean is watching the SWAT clip on her own timeline. Chrisean is watching the sheriff's report circulate. Chrisean is watching her name get printed as a suspect. And Chrisean has a decision to make in the next 24 hours. Either Chrisean issues a public denial with lawyer-signed language, or Chrisean stays quiet and lets the ambiguity work in her favor. Either move is a strategic move. Either move gets discussed on every gossip channel in the ecosystem. Either move sells clicks. And Chrisean, whatever else Chrisean is a woman who has learned how to sell clicks in her sleep. Cut the sugar out of it. Chrisean is going to weigh in before the sun comes up, and Chrisean's version is going to reset the entire conversation on a Wednesday morning. Break it down like this. Jaidyn Alexis is watching too. Jaidyn just posted a warning to Blueface, Chrisean, and Nevaeh 3 days ago. Jaidyn's warning has now aged into a prophecy. Jaidyn's audience is going to reread that warning tonight and treat it like scripture. And Jaidyn's PR team is going to have a very lucrative week regardless of whether Jaidyn actually made the call or not. Sometimes in the celebrity economy, being suspected of a thing is more valuable than doing the thing. Jaidyn just got handed a 2-week news cycle. Jaidyn's team is going to milk it. And by the end of the week, Jaidyn will have released either a diss track, a podcast episode, or a lawyer statement, and any of the three will trend. Real simple, Chrisean is the ghost in this machine. Chrisean doesn't post. Chrisean doesn't stream. Chrisean doesn't hold press conferences. Chrisean is the one name on Blueface suspect list who has zero incentive to speak publicly. And that silence is going to look guilty to some viewers and innocent to others. Chrisean, if Chrisean is smart, will not respond at all. Chrisean, if Chrisean is smart, will let the noise burn itself out around him and reappear in a month acting like nothing happened. The problem for Blueface is that Chrisean's silence robs the story of a satisfying second act, and stories without satisfying second acts fold into the next news cycle without resolving. Blueface needs Chrisean to speak. Chrisean will not speak. Advantage Chrisean. Here's the thing you have to understand about SWAT calls on public figures. There is a specific psychological profile behind the average SWATter. Isolated, tech-savvy, resentful, financially motivated, or ideologically motivated. The overlap between that profile and the three names Blueface offered on camera is limited. Chrisean is neither isolated nor financially motivated. Jaidyn is neither isolated nor tech-savvy in that particular way. Chrisean is the only name on the list that fits the profile on paper, but Chrisean is also the only name on the list without a public feud on the record. So either the profile is wrong, or Blueface is wrong, or there is a fourth suspect nobody has said out loud yet. Baby, listen, that fourth suspect is where the story is actually going. Let me slide the needle over to that fourth suspect for a minute, because the streets have been whispering. There is a name floating in the group chats that Blueface will not say on camera. There is a name that has been dropped in 3 separate reply threads under 3 separate SWAT response videos in the last 4 months. That name has 0 official confirmation, so I will not print it here. This is a receipts first channel. But the name exists, the pattern exists, and the timeline exists. If the sheriff's department finally cracks that burner phone, and if the number traces back to the name the streets have been whispering, this story is going to detonate a second time in about 6 weeks. Bookmark this video. Come back to it in 6 weeks. Watch the timeline prove itself. Cut the sugar out of it. The reason none of the mainstream outlets have picked this up yet is because the story is too messy for a print byline. There is no clean hero. There is no clean villain. There is no clean policy hook. There is only a 4-year-old baby, a restaurant on borrowed time, a fiancé on a countdown clock, a rapper on a live stream, 3 suspects with 3 motives, 1 deputy with a rifle, and a burner phone that dispatch cannot trace. That is not a Washington Post story. That is a TMZ story. That is a gossip story. That is a neighborhood talk story. And that is why the truth of this incident is going to be assembled in the comment sections and clip channels before it is ever assembled by a professional reporter. Bottom line, the internet is the newsroom now. And the internet just filed the first draft. Watch this, the mid-video pivot. Because there is one clip from the raw footage that nobody in the commentary corner has flagged yet. It's the moment when a deputy asked Blueface, offhand, if this was his first day. Blueface laughed. But the deputy repeated the question. And Blueface stopped laughing. And Blueface, for the first time all night, gave a straight answer. He said, quietly, that he was tired. He said the SWAT calls were getting old. He said that if the deputies were going to keep showing up every other week, he needed a personal escort. That single moment, 3 seconds of unfiltered exhaustion on a man who spends every waking hour performing, is the single most humanizing frame in the entire live stream. And the internet clipped past it. Because the internet does not want Blueface humanized. The internet wants Blueface cornered. And once the audience decides a person is cornered, the audience does not accept new evidence. Peep this. When Blueface finally got his kid back, when the deputy walked the 4-year-old across the parking lot and handed him over, Blueface did something remarkable. He picked the boy up. He held him against his chest. He turned his back to the camera for the first time in the entire broadcast. And for 4 seconds, I timed it, the camera was pointed at a wall. For seconds. That's the closest thing to privacy that child has experienced on his father's stream all year. For seconds is not a redemption arc. But 4 seconds is not nothing either. And if you were looking for a sliver of evidence that Blueface still has an off switch, that was it. For seconds facing a wall. Here's the thing. I am not in the business of redeeming Blueface. And I am not in the business of burying Blueface. I am in the business of receipts. And the receipts tonight are ugly. The receipts tonight are conflicting. The receipts tonight tell us that Blueface is exhausted and unrepentant, that Nevaeh is terrified and complicit, that the baby is present and invisible, that Chrisean is watching and dangerous, that Jaidyn is warned and vindicated, and that Chrisean is silent and inscrutable. Every one of those 7 receipts contradicts at least one of the others, which means the coming week is going to look chaotic and the coming month is going to look worse. And whichever gossip channel gets the timeline right first is going to own the next Blueface cycle from top to bottom. Bottom line, the Sheriff's Department has 3 tools. Tool 1 is the burner phone trace, which the deputies have already admitted is not working. Tool 2 is a subpoena to the platform Blueface was streaming on, which requires a judge's signature and a specific active investigation predicate. Tool 3 is a grand jury referral for the false report statute, which requires a suspect. Every one of those tools takes weeks. Every one of those tools requires paperwork. And every one of those tools operates on a timeline that is much slower than the news cycle. Which means Blueface is going to be back on stream by Friday. Which means the next SWAT call is already being planned by whoever planned this one. Which means the whole cycle is going to spin one more time before the state catches up. Break it down like this. If you're a parent watching this, your question is about the baby. If you're a taxpayer watching this, your question is about the deputies. If you're a fan watching this, your question is about the next stream. If you're a Chrisean loyalist watching this, your question is about the diss track. If you're a lawyer watching this, your question is about the defamation exposure. Every audience is watching a different movie. That is why this story is going to keep hitting the algorithm for the next 30 days, because every audience gets its own version to click on. Cut the sugar out of it. This is the kind of story that pays every content creator in the ecosystem for a month. Blueface is going to make more money off this incident than off his last 3 singles combined. And that fact, more than anything else, is why the SWAT calls will not stop. Peep this last piece, because it's the piece that separates the surface from the substance. Somewhere in the sheriff's report, buried on page 3, there is a sentence about the 4-year-old giving a deputy a high five as he walked past. One deputy told Blueface about it in the parking lot. Blueface repeated it back on camera. And then the moment was gone. But that high five is the most important sentence in the whole report. Because that high five means the 4-year-old, in the middle of a full tactical response with rifles up in his father's restaurant, was not scared. That high five means the 4-year-old has done this so many times that he has learned to greet the deputies. That high five means the SWAT call has become part of the child's routine. And a SWAT call becoming part of a child's routine is the single most damning sentence I can write about any parent alive. That is not a childhood. That is a case file. Baby, listen, we are going to keep every one of these receipts on file. We are going to bookmark every sheriff's log. We are going to timestamp every live stream. We are going to build the paper trail one broadcast at a time, because the paper trail is the only thing that survives the news cycle. Blueface is going to try to bury this by Friday. Nevaeh is going to try to spin this by Saturday. Chrisean is going to try to hijack this by Sunday. And by the middle of next week, the algorithm is going to have moved on to whatever the next crisis is. But we are not moving on. Not yet. Not until somebody in a robe or somebody in a badge or somebody at the platform makes a decision that protects that 4-year-old. Cut the sugar out of it and give me the truth in the comment box. Do you believe Blueface suspect list? Do you think it's Chrisean? Do you think it's Jaidyn? Do you think it's Chrisean? Or do you think it's the 4th name the streets are whispering about? Drop your verdict in the box under this video, family. I'm reading every single one. And if you want the follow-up when the burner phone finally gets traced, you know what to do. The subscribe button lights up different when you're paying attention. We are not going anywhere. This story is not going anywhere. And the next chapter is closer than any of us think. I'm going to leave you with one last frame, because this is the one that has not stopped playing in my head since the sheriff's report dropped. The camera is still rolling. Blueface is holding the baby. The deputies are walking back to their cruisers. Nevaeh is standing by the door. And in the background, faintly, you can hear the chat scrolling. The chat is still tipping. The chat is still gifting subscriptions. The chat is still typing the word content over and over again. That is the sound of a live stream that never learned to stop. That is the sound of an audience that has forgotten what a real emergency looks like. That is the sound of a platform economy that pays cash for trauma and does not ask questions about the traumatized. And that is the sound that is going to define this Blueface chapter for the record. See you in the next one, family. Cameras up. Receipts out. We ride at dawn.